Mars for a Cancer ascendant. Now, when we're thinking about these ascendants and how the planets relate to them, remember it is the house lordships of each planet related to that ascendant, which actually gives the information about that ascendant. So the qualities that you think of related to Cancer are not simply because it's Cancer. It's because the Sun rules the second house from Cancer, Mercury rules the third, Venus rules the fourth, Mars rules the fifth, Jupiter rules the sixth. What those planets mean, ruling those houses, how that impacts the person's path in life, that is what gives the experience of the ascendant. So it's more complicated than we typically think. For Mars, Mars rules over which houses for Cancer. Mars rules over the fifth house. It rules over Scorpio. Mars also rules over the 10th house, which is Aries for a Cancer ascendant, which shows that Mars is a profound planet of activity, the 10th house lordship, as well as creativity, the 5th house lordship. Now think about that. When most people think of Mars, or not Mars, pardon me, when most people think of Cancer, what is one of the first things that comes to their mind, whether it's accurate or not? But what is the first thing that comes to their mind? They think about someone who is very family-oriented, who loves children, who is very motherly, who builds a nice home, and so on. Now, why might that be the case, having Mars ruling over the 5th and the 10th? Well, now we have Mars, which is the 10th lord, the lord of activity, of the karma we get involved with, also ruling over the 5th house of children. So having those two things together is what gives that stereotypical idea of Cancerians being good parents or good mothers, or having family is extreme importance and being very prolific. Now, again, it's just a stereotype because there's a lot more that goes into it than that. But that's where that stereotype comes from on one level. Mars is an extremely good planet for Cancer. And as we learned in the apprenticeship course for the yogas, the Raj yogas and all the various other kinds of yogas, that since Mars rules over the 5th house and the 10th house, that it becomes a natural royal yoga producer. Now, Mars is a cruel planet ruling in an angle, and they say when it rules an angle, it becomes a little more auspicious. But what actually makes it more auspicious is not necessarily the angle. There's some truth to that, but it's because Mars also rules the 5th house, which is one of the more powerful trines, trinal houses, house of fortune and grace. So now we can see that from the idea of house lordship, that a Cancerian is often going to have a focus on either children or raising a family, or they're going to be, can be very prolific, creative. They can also be extremely intelligent. They have an easier capacity towards intelligence, and they have to be cautious with what I say because, well, I guess I don't have to, but I'm just going to for this video. Someone in one of the Saturn Gemini videos thought that I was being bitter by saying that, I don't know, I said something about Gemini, and they said, well, what made you so bitter about that? And I wasn't bitter. So my question is, what kind of projection do you have going on that makes you think that what I said was bitter? But there are going to be some generalizations that come out just because we're talking about very general things. But returning to this idea, the reason Cancerians often have an extreme and profound capacity towards intelligence is because Mars rules the 5th house. And Mars is one of the more important problem solvers. And while intelligence can be measured in many different ways, most of the time, at least in our current culture, intelligence is measured by the ability to problem solve, prevent problems, figure things out, which is a Martian quality. Doing good research, having a lot of information and knowledge, that's a mercurial quality. So we have to have a combination of many things for true intelligence. But most of the time, Cancerians are perceived to have greater intelligence if their Mars is functioning very well. Mars is debilitated. Mars is debilitated in Cancer. It's debilitated in Cancer. So here we have a really wonderful planet for the Ascendant, debilitated in the Ascendant itself. And part of the reason this is true is because Cancerians, ideally, they need to use that Mars in unselfish ways. Another reason why the idea of being a good parent, being a good support person is related to Cancer, because most of the time, if they are using Mars well, they're very good at watching out for others, being that mother hen who takes care of the brood. So having that Mars, that problem-solving ability, that intelligence debilitated in the first house, often shows that selfishness tends to always sabotage their ability to think clearly about how to problem solve, help others, and so on. And to that end, we also have Mars exalted in the 7th house from Cancer. So it's exalted in the 7th, which shows that naturally Cancerians are meant to use their intelligence, that 5th house, focus their creativity, their activity, because it rules over the 10th as well, towards supporting others, supporting the growth of others, helping people through their difficulties, because this is happening in Capricorn, which is the sign of those kinds of karmas that people typically have to suffer through. So having the 10th Lord exalted in the 7th usually gives Cancerians a great ability to see the problems that need to be corrected and fixed in others. If there are problems with that Mars and the Cancerian becomes overbearing, well, in a sense it backfires, because then no one listens to them. So there has to be a bit of gentleness tied into that. But if a Cancerian uses their creativity or tries to overly identify with their children, or overly identify with the creative process, or try to define themselves through their family, saying, I am the matriarch or patriarch, and I am important because I created this family and I support and sustain this family, those Cancerians do tend to turn into a little bit more aggressive, tyrannical, bitter person in the long run. Because that blueprint of Mars for Cancer is to use it to selflessly support other people. Again, that's why it's exalted. The area of career, 10th Lord, and the area of creativity and children and good fortune is all exalted in the 7th house. So there's a strong other person focus with Mars related to Cancer ascendants. Cancer ascendants typically work very well with other people because, again, the 10th Lord exalted in the 7th. Cancerians tend to work very poorly alone. Now, of course, there could be other things involved there. Maybe the person has Saturn and Ketu on the ascendant, so they're naturally going to feel uncomfortable being around lots of people. But just going by the general blueprint, when you have the 10th Lord and the 5th Lord debilitated in the 1st, that's showing a person not having the energy to do what they need to relate to others, to build good networks with others, to see that socialization is very healthy for other people. Oftentimes you get a debilitated Mars in the 1st, and sometimes this will be the kind of person who decides they want to homeschool their kid because they want to avoid whatever diseases are passed around in public schools and all the hate and violence and so on, when really that's just making, well, let's be careful there. That has the potential to make the child weak, if you think about it. If you're always protecting them from something, you're not teaching them how to deal with things. So when you get Cancer debilitated in the 1st, oftentimes the issue that arises there is that the individual is overprotective, hyperprotective, such that the people that is in their care or the people they're meant to take care of become weak because they don't make the people they're meant to take care of competent. So you see, the goal with a good Cancerian, a good archetype of a parent, is to teach those that they are in charge of how to be competent, how to go out into Capricorn and see the problems and see the alligators and see the sea monsters and deal with them. Not say, we're going to completely shut you away from all difficulties, all sea monsters, all alligators, so when you actually escape one day and run into one, you don't get eaten. So this is one of the more philosophical ideas that we need to consider about Mars for a Cancer ascendant. But overall, Mars is a very good planet for Cancer ascendant. And if the individual is able to balance Mars well, is able to consider the qualities of Mars, of problem solving when there is a problem, of going out and exploring the world when something new needs to be developed, breaking new ground, being a pioneer when something, Mars is the inventor that invents for a purpose to fix something, not to just create something weird. So there's a difference there. And if you're not trying to just pick fights where everywhere you look, you see someone who's attacking your ideals or your principles, that's not a healthy Mars. Or if you think that you have the only right way and every other philosophy that does not agree with your mental position is wrong, that's a difficult Mars. That's why most of the time it's even important to realize who has a difficult Mars, so you will know who's worth arguing with and who's not worth arguing with. And what do I mean by that? A good argument, a good debate helps both people. It helps both people grow. It helps both people sharpen their skills. It helps increase the intelligence of both people. But if you're having an argument or a debate with someone who absolutely has no flexibility in their mind, who thinks that what they have figured out up to this point is all there is and that's it, and they cannot be talked to in any other way, there's no point in even approaching that usually. You can't talk to someone like that because they're set in their beliefs, they're set in their ideals, and maybe you're like that, or maybe you know people like that. But either way, hopefully the more you live life, the more you see that everything is changing and evolving. And once you get to the point where you think, I know it all, you're setting yourself up for decay as it keeps going. It is endless, the ways that you learn, the ways things grow, the ways things change. And a good Mars understands that, but is appropriate with it. Okay, so consider this for Mars related to the Cancer ascendant.